Hey guys, how are we all? Welcome back to the Twist the Bones podcast, where most weeks I sit down and I read and react to a bunch of spooky, scary, horrifying and weird stories that range from ghosts and the paranormal to the real life encounters with creepy people and potentially dangerous people too. So like always, I just want to quickly go over some housekeeping things before I get into this week's stories. So firstly, I will always credit the people who wrote these stories, so all of the information will be in the description of each episode, so if you want to go and support those content creators, feel free to check them out there. And finally, if you have your own scary story, whether that be an encounter with a stalker or your own paranormal experience, and you want it to feature in a future episode, please reach out and send your story over to me. So you can do this by either using the Facebook page, which is Twist the Bones Podcast, which I really need to start using because I am useless at posting on there, or you can actually email it to twistthebonespod@gmail.com. So I think that was everything. So let's get into this week's stories. Once again, I am reading them from the yourghoststories.com website. If you haven't checked it out, it's really good. You should definitely spend a bit of time giving some of those stories a read. So today's stories are actually somewhat Christmas related. I thought I would try and squeeze in a couple of weeks of Christmas stories just because it is Christmas. So if you celebrate it, happy Christmas season. If you don't, happy December. And I've just got a few short ones today. So the first one is called Daddy's Home, and this was written by Amy Gunn. My dad passed away in December of 2005. He was 67 and seemed very healthy, considering he was a heavy smoker. When he was taken to the hospital, he told us he knew he wasn't coming home and that he had laid out the suit that he was to be buried in along with his will. I told him he was being silly and that he would be home soon. At the hospital, the doctors told us he had severe heart blockage and would require bypass surgery immediately if he stood a chance of surviving. They performed the surgery and said it went well, but he never woke up from the surgery. He lived only 2 days after. A few weeks later, we were at my mother's house for Christmas. It was my husband and me and our 2 sons, aged 12 and 6, my brother and his wife and his 4 children and my mother. My parents loved Christmas and still treated us as though we were children. There were just tons of presents in the living room and we sat down to pass out our gifts. My mother-in-law and nephew were elected to play Santa, as we call it, and they have to wear Santa hats. I was taking their picture in front of the Christmas tree, and in the curtain behind the tree you can see the perfect image of my dad's silhouette in the picture. Since that night, we can hear him upstairs, walking around in his bedroom, and his TV will come on, and there is no one upstairs. I also have smelled smoke in the living room by his recliner, where he watched TV and smoked after supper. My kids say that when they spend the night with my mother, that my dad tells them good night, and then you can hear him going upstairs to bed. It scares them, and they don't like to go over there anymore. As time goes on, more things are beginning to happen in the house. Dad was the only one that went upstairs, and since his death we rarely go up there for any reason. On occasion, we go up there to go to the attic, and his toilet will flush, and no one is in there. Should I just let him be, or is there anything I can do to help him move on? So that is the end of that one, and there is actually a photo included in that. I will obviously leave the link to this story, so if you want to go and check it out and see the photo mentioned in that story, feel free. It is an interesting one. But I am actually going to move on to the next one. So this next one is called Unexplained Event in My Grandfather's House, and this is by Kentucky Believer. On the day before my 25th birthday, my maternal grandmother passed away. She'd been incredibly sick for several years, and on December 20th of 2017, she finally lost her fight, leaving our whole family devastated. For several days after my grandmother's death, I stayed with my aunt at her apartment, considering my mother and I were visiting Northern Ohio from our home in Kentucky where my grandmother died. But I returned to my grandfather's house on Christmas Eve, which is where my story begins. First, I'd like to explain that my grandmother was a very vocal person, never hiding what she felt. This experience, in my opinion, proves that she is still that way now. On Christmas Day, my family decided to gather at my grandfather's house for Christmas, all of us believing we should stick together. We spent the day preparing food, wrapping gifts, and making sure everything was ready. Everything was going well, despite the sadness that everyone in the house felt, until I decided to shower before the party. I decided to listen to the song Do I Wanna Know by the Arctic Monkeys and turn it on repeat for the duration of my shower. Well, that was my intention, until the song suddenly changed to Supermarket Flowers by Ed Sheeran. For anyone who doesn't know this song, it was written by Ed Sheeran from his mother's perspective after the death of his grandmother. I was confused and sad until I remembered having a conversation about that song with my mother the night before. I felt like my grandmother was telling me I needed to be there for my mum, and it had me in tears until I turned my music off. If this was a one-time occurrence, I would more than likely have forgotten about it, but this has happened several times since I came home, leading to me no longer playing music during my showers. It always changes to the exact same song, no matter what playlist I have on. In a strange way, it is comforting to know my grandmother still watches over me. And that is the end of that one. So far, these have been quite not nice stories. Obviously, no one wants to lose a family member, especially around Christmas, but these have been quite nice stories, not super, super spooky. So we could be having a bit more of a chilled, less frightening week this week, but I'm going to move on to the next one. And this is by Cassie T89, and this is called My Auntie. When I was 4, my auntie died in a fire. I still remember her a little and know what she looks like, as I've seen so many photos. She was a very funny woman and always joking around and being jolly from what I remember and from what my mum has told me. Every Christmas when I was little we stayed with my nan. My mum and I would sleep in the spare room on a mattress on the floor and my brother would sleep in with my auntie. One Christmas day when I was 9, I woke up to feel my mum on one side of me, like normal, but there was also someone else on the other side of me. I didn't open my eyes because I assumed it was my brother, but I said to my mum, "Oh, tell him to get out of the bed." I then reached over, with my eyes still closed, and felt for him. I felt an adult-sized arm and the skin was so soft it was definitely there. At that, I jumped up and opened my eyes, but there was no one there. I told my mum and she's convinced that was my auntie, as the spare room had been her bedroom. The next Christmas I was at my aunt's again, and everyone was in the living room. I walked through the kitchen by myself, and there was my auntie's head in mid-air above the counter. I know that sounds strange, but she was looking through the little porthole that goes through to the living room and looking at everyone, smiling. She also looked at me and smiled. I can't explain why, but I carried on walking into the living room like it was normal. Then I suddenly thought, whoa, what did I just see? And I asked my mum to come into the kitchen with me and told her what I saw. I was actually really freaked out this time, and I made my mum come for a walk with me because I was so scared. I mean, I know it was my auntie, but it was still scary. Anyway, after that time my mum said if she was scaring me, I should ask out loud for her not to do it again. So I did, and I've never seen her again. I know it sounds mean doing that, but it did scare me. Some people don't believe this story, but I know it's true. I may have been a child, but you don't feel an arm that real next to you and the weight of another body, and you don't see someone that clearly, and they aren't there. It's not even like I was thinking about her or ghosts at the time. She just really was there. I'm thinking perhaps she wanted to show me and my mum she's still around because my nan never talks about her because she gets so distraught. I do like to think she's looking over us. And that is the end of that one. So that was 3 somewhat nice stories. Again, it's sad that these people have lost family members, but those were pretty nice stories. I mean, yes, I would have been freaked out in all 3 of those instances, but at the same time, I personally would like to believe that sometimes family members do try and contact you and let you know that you're okay after they've moved on. And yeah, some spirits and people do stick around. So yeah, those were really interesting to read. So a little bit unexpected, but a bit of a nice one this week. But that is actually all the stories that I'm going to read out this week. So thank you so much for listening. You guys are going to have to let me know your thoughts about these stories, which was your favourite and all that jazz. You can head on over to my YouTube channel, which is linked in the description of the episodes if you want to leave some comments, or like I mentioned, you can head on over to the Facebook page and leave your thoughts there. But yeah, thank you so much for listening. Feel free to drop me your stories over on that email address. I would be absolutely honoured to read them out. If you do that, please could you give like a very short title or description in the subject? So that would be absolutely amazing. If you want to keep up with me in the meantime, feel free to head on over to my Instagram. It's just at AlienQueenMeg. And that is all for today. So I will catch you in my next one. Stay spooky, guys.